work in the field of agriculture and ecology, and my main interest is the nutrient cycles that dominate the food production area, so fertilizers that are being applied in order to make crops grow better. But because a lot of fertilizer is not efficient, it ends up in the environment. It causes tremendous damage, both in waterways and for organisms, but also for our greenhouse budget. Agriculture contributes about 25% or a quarter of all of the anthropogenic greenhouse gases that are produced. And a lot of people don't know as much about that, the general public, than they do about maybe the effect of climate change on agriculture. But when you look at this impact of agriculture, which of course is a big proportion of our total greenhouse budget, it is because of sort of three major areas. One is the land use change, so when people clear especially tropical forests and other natural ecosystems and they convert them into agricultural land, you generally lose a lot of the carbon from both trees and soil, and that adds to the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. For crop production, it's mostly the fertilizers, because they are not that efficient in many instances, and so they end up in the environment and they contribute potent greenhouse gases, especially nitrous oxide, which I think now accounts for nearly 10% of global warming, and that's just because of fertilizer use in agriculture. And the third contributor is livestock, so the increasing numbers of livestock, because there's more and more demand for milk and meat products with more and more people. We create greenhouse gases, or these animals create greenhouse gases by just their digestion, but also from their manures. Well, the example on Australia is of course one very close to home, because that's been very much debated, because the coral reefs are in decline, and the idea is that the fertilizer runoff promotes algae growth, and the algae will then change the water quality and feed, for example, crown of thorns starfish, which are predatory starfish that destroy coral. And nearly half of the coral, of the 40% of coral that are dead in some areas, are dead because of the attack of these starfish. So a direct link has been shown by research in North Queensland researchers to show that this link between fertilizers, algal growth and starfish is damaging corals tremendously. Well, I hope that they will discuss all of those aspects of land use change, because currently, especially in poor areas where there's high population pressure and very low yields, people are clearing more and more land in order to have more agricultural land, and that's not sustainable. But these nations or regions need help. They can't just be left to their own devices, and that will include technologies to improve crop productivity, including ways of stopping soils from degrading and improving these fertilizer supplies from a range of resources that can be turned into new types of fertilizers that address particular problems of problematic soils or problematic climates. Yeah, I suppose when population pressure was less high in many regions, people would have done what's called slash and burn agriculture. So they had soils, they used them for crop production, and when the soils were not productive anymore, they would move away and the land would regenerate. So natural vegetation would grow back, and the forest would come back generally. And as populations increase though, these resting times for soil become less and less. So there's now areas that have just been used for cropping year in, year out, and if no inputs occur, and this is many parts of Africa, there's no access to fertilizers, and even the residue of crops are being fed to animals rather than remaining in the soil, because again, soil is a complex mixture of minerals, of organic materials, and are very easily degraded if you don't do the right thing. So knowledge has to be developed and implemented to help poor nations to increase their yield, but to do so sustainably without huge environmental and economic penalties. And this investment into technologies and technology transfers, what I'm hoping will be discussed at COP21.